The sound of gunshots crackled in the distance as Rebecca Evans stumbled into Hays City, Kansas, her trembling fingers clutching the tattered map that had guided her through 3 days of desperate travel. Blood from her split lip had dried in a thin crust, and she struggled to keep her bruised eye open as the merciless summer sun beat down on the dusty Main Street. It was 1876, and for Rebecca, this desolate frontier town represented her last hope of escape. The journey had taken everything she had. Her once fine blue dress was now soiled with dust and sweat, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her face as she tried to conceal the worst of her injuries. 22 years of life had not prepared her for the brutality of her husband's fists, nor for the courage it would take to flee in the dead of night while he lay in a drunken stupor. Rebecca paused at the edge of town, her eyes scanning the weathered wooden buildings that lined both sides of the street. Horses were tied at hitching posts, and men in dusty clothes moved purposefully between the saloon and the general store. She needed to find the stage-coach office, but fear kept her frozen in place. What if someone recognized her? What if word got back to Harold? Taking a deep breath, she adjusted her shawl to better hide the bruises on her neck and arms before stepping onto the wooden sidewalk. The map she'd stolen from Harold's desk had gotten her this far, but Hays City was larger than she'd anticipated. She needed to find the Wells Fargo office before nightfall, before her courage failed her completely. As she walked, she kept her head down, avoiding the curious glances of the townspeople. A group of men stood outside the saloon, their laughter carrying on the hot breeze. Rebecca quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had taken her husband's money enough, she hoped, to buy passage east to St. Louis where her aunt lived. If she could just make it there, she might have a chance at a new life. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A tall man on a chestnut mare slowed as he approached the general store. Unlike the other men she'd seen, there was something commanding about his presence. His broad shoulders were draped in a worn leather vest, and the brim of his hat cast a shadow over his face. As he dismounted with practiced ease, Rebecca noticed the well-worn holster at his hip and the confident way he moved. A cowboy, a real one, not like the dandies who called themselves cattlemen back in her husband's social circle. Before she could think better of it, Rebecca approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could you direct me to the Wells Fargo office? I need to purchase a ticket for the eastbound stage." The man turned, and Rebecca instinctively took a step back. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, and for a moment they widened with surprise. Then his gaze sharpened, taking in her split lip, the bruise darkening around her left eye and the way she clutched her shawl around her throat. "Madam," he said, his voice low and steady. His eyes flicked to her wedding ring, then back to her face. Something in his expression hardened. "You're not going back there." Rebecca stared at him, her mouth slightly open. I don't understand. I just need directions. Name's Finn Irwin," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "And I recognize trouble when I see it." He glanced down the street, then back at her. "Wells Fargo closed an hour ago. Stage doesn't leave till morning anyway." Panic flared in Rebecca's chest. "But I need to. I can't stay here. I need to leave tonight." Finn's eyes softened. "Madam, I don't know your story, but I can see plain as day you're running from someone who's got no right laying hands on a woman." Rebecca felt tears threatening and blinked rapidly to hold them back. "You don't understand. If he finds me, he won't," Finn said with quiet certainty. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He tied his horse to the hitching post and took a step closer to her. "My sister runs a boarding house on the edge of town. Clean, respectable place. You'd be safe there until the stage comes through tomorrow." Rebecca hesitated, clutching her small bag closer. I don't have much money. Sarah doesn't charge folks in need, Finn said. And if you're worried about your reputation, she's got the respect of everyone in Hayes City. He paused, his expression grave. Madam, I've seen what happens to women who try to make it alone on these roads after dark. It ain't safe. The truth of his words sank in. Rebecca had nowhere else to go, and night was approaching. Still, she had learned the hard way that a man's kindness often came with expectations. Why would you help me? She asked, studying his face for signs of deceit. Finn's jaw tightened. My ma died running from my pa when I was 12. Nobody helped her. He looked away briefly. I swore I'd never turn my back on someone in the same situation. Something in his words rang true, and Rebecca felt the wall she'd built around herself crack slightly. I'm Rebecca, she said softly. Rebecca Evans. Miss Evans, he acknowledged with a slight nod. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to Sarah's. You look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to rest. As they walked side by side down the dusty street, Rebecca kept glancing over her shoulder. Harold had connections. What if he had already telegraphed ahead to have her intercepted? What if this stranger was leading her into another trap? He won't find you, Finn said, seeming to read her thoughts. Hayes City's got 3,000 souls and folks passing through every day. It's easy to disappear here if you want to. You don't know my husband, Rebecca whispered. He doesn't give up what he considers his property. Finn's expression darkened. No man has the right to treat his wife as property, Miss Evans. Not in my book. They turned down a side street lined with more modest homes. At the end stood a 2-story building with a small sign reading Irwin Boarding House. As they approached, the door opened, and a woman with the same striking blue eyes as Finn stepped onto the porch. Bringing me strays again, brother, she called, but her smile was kind. Sarah, this is Miss Evans. She needs a room for the night and a meal if you can spare it, Finn said, removing his hat as they climbed the steps. Sarah's warm expression faltered as she took in Rebecca's injuries, but she quickly recovered. Of course. Come in, dear. I've just put supper on. The inside of the boarding house was simple but clean, with a large common room and a dining area visible through an archway. The scent of cooking food made Rebecca's stomach clench painfully. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Thank you, Rebecca said, awkwardly clutching her small bag. I can pay. We'll talk about that after you've had something to eat, Sarah interrupted gently. Finn, are you staying for supper? If there's enough, he replied, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. Rebecca followed Sarah to the dining room, where a few other boarders were already seated, a schoolteacher by the looks of her, and an older gentleman with spectacles who barely looked up from his book. No one remarked on Rebecca's appearance, though she felt their curious glances. As they ate, Rebecca kept her eyes on her plate, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of these strangers. The stew was hearty, and the bread fresh, better than anything she'd had in weeks. Harold had taken to withholding meals as punishment for imagined slights. Miss Evans is taking tomorrow's stage east, Finn explained to his sister over coffee after the meal. I thought she'd be safer here than at the hotel. Sarah nodded. Certainly, I'll have a room ready in no time. She turned to Rebecca. Would you like a bath drawn? Nothing helps settle the nerves like hot water and a bit of lavender soap. The thought of washing away the dust and memories of the past few days brought unexpected tears to Rebecca's eyes. That would be. I would appreciate that very much. While Sarah prepared the bath in a small room off the kitchen, Finn stepped onto the porch. Rebecca followed him, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. Mr. Irwin, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. I don't know how to thank you. He turned, his profile silhouetted against the fading light. No thanks needed, Miss Evans. Any decent man would have done the same. No, she said with quiet certainty. They wouldn't. Most would have looked the other way, or worse. Finn met her gaze. Then there aren't enough decent men in this world, he hesitated. If you don't mind my asking, where are you headed, St. Louis, she replied. My aunt lives there. I haven't seen her since I was married, but she never approved of Harold. I'm hoping she'll take me in until I can find work. Finn nodded. That's a good plan. St. Louis has opportunities for a woman with education. Rebecca gave a bitter laugh. My education consisted of learning which fork to use at dinner and how to pour tea without spilling. Harold didn't believe wives needed much more than that. Sounds like Harold is a damn fool, Finn said, then immediately looked contrite. Pardon my language. For the first time in months, Rebecca felt the ghost of a smile tug at her lips. No need to apologize. I've called him worse in my head. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sun setting over the prairie. Rebecca felt strangely at ease with this man, something she hadn't experienced with any man since before her marriage. Bath's ready, Sarah called from the doorway, breaking the moment. That night, clean and dressed in a nightgown Sarah had loaned her, Rebecca lay in a soft bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the boarding house. Down the hall, she could hear Finn and Sarah talking in low voices. She couldn't make out the words, but the concern in their tones was evident. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares of Harold finding her, his hands around her throat as they had been the night she finally decided to flee. She woke before dawn, heart racing, half convinced she could hear his heavy footsteps on the stairs. When she finally gave up on sleep and dressed, she found Finn already in the kitchen, drinking coffee with his sister. "Morning, Miss Evans," he said, rising from his chair. "How'd you sleep?" "Well enough, thank you," she lied, accepting the cup of coffee Sarah offered. "Stage doesn't leave till noon," Sarah said, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before her. "Eat up. The road east is long and the food at way stations isn't worth the price." Rebecca ate mechanically, her mind racing. In a few hours she would be on her way to St. Louis, leaving behind this brief respite of kindness. The thought filled her with unexpected melancholy. "I'll walk you to the stage office," Finn said as she finished her breakfast. "Need to head that way anyhow." Outside, the morning air was crisp, promising another hot day. As they walked toward the center of town, Rebecca found herself studying Finn's profile. In the clear light of day, she could see the lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun, and a small scar that cut through his right eyebrow. He wasn't conventionally handsome like Harold, whose good looks had masked the cruelty beneath, but there was something compelling about Finn's weathered face. "What will you do after you take me to the stage?" she asked, suddenly curious about this man who had shown her such unexpected kindness. "Got cattle to move north," he replied. "Working as trail boss for the Double R Ranch this season. We're driving 2,000 head to the railhead in Dodge." "Sounds dangerous," she said. He shrugged. "Can be. Weather's the biggest threat this time of year, that and rustlers." He glanced at her. "What about you? What will you do in St. Louis?" Rebecca had asked herself the same question countless times during her planning. "Find work, I suppose. My aunt keeps house for a wealthy family. Perhaps she can help me find a position as a maid or companion." Finn frowned. "Seems a waste." "You strike me as a woman with a sharp mind." The compliment took her by surprise. Harold had always belittled her intellect, mocking her interest in books and current events. "Thank you, but I have few practical skills." Harold didn't believe wives should work. "Harold sounds like he had a lot of beliefs that don't hold water," Finn said dryly. They reached the Wells Fargo office just as the clerk was unlocking the door. Rebecca's heart began to race as reality set in. This was it, she was really leaving, really starting over. One ticket to St. Louis, please, she said, her voice steadier than she felt as she approached the counter. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger. Stage to St. Louis is $12, madam. Rebecca reached into her reticule, counting out the bills carefully. It was nearly half of what she had managed to take from Harold's desk before fleeing. Stage leaves at noon, the clerk said, handing her a ticket. You can wait inside if you like. It'll be full today. We've got 6 passengers already booked. Rebecca nodded her thanks and turned to find Finn watching her with an unreadable expression. So that's that, she said, attempting a smile. I reckon so, he replied, but he made no move to leave. Instead, he cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Evans, I was thinking. The door to the office burst open, cutting him off. A man in a dusty suit strode in, his face red with exertion. Telegram for the stage office, he announced, handing a yellow paper to the clerk. Rebecca froze, a chill running down her spine despite the warm morning. Telegrams meant news traveling faster than she could. Telegrams meant Harold could have sent word ahead. The clerk read the message, then looked up, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Mrs. Harold Blackburn, he called. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. Harold's mother's maiden name, the one he sometimes used for business. He was looking for her. That's not me, she stammered, backing toward the door. The clerk frowned. Message says to be on the lookout for a Rebecca Blackburn, traveling under an assumed name. Dark hair, blue eyes, about 22 years of age. His gaze lingered on her bruised face. Says she's stolen family property and is wanted by her husband. Finn stepped forward, placing himself between Rebecca and the clerk. Mister, I don't know who you think this lady is, but her name is Evans, and she's my cousin from Topeka. Been visiting my sister and is now headed to St. Louis to see her ailing mother. The clerk looked uncertain. The description matches, and the telegram says she might be injured. Course she's injured, Finn said with convincing indignation. Took a fall from a wagon 2 days ago. Ain't that right, cousin Rebecca? Rebecca nodded mutely, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The clerk hesitated, then shrugged. Well, I'm just supposed to report if I see anyone matching the description. Not my business to detain nobody. Appreciate your understanding, Finn said, taking Rebecca's arm. Come on, cousin, let's get you something to eat before your journey. Outside, Rebecca's knees threatened to buckle. He found me, she whispered. How did he find me so quickly? Finn led her away from the stage office, his expression grim. Money and connections. Men like that, they don't give up easy when their pride's been hurt. I can't take the stage now, Rebecca said, panic rising in her throat. He'll have people watching at every stop. No, you can't, Finn agreed. He hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. Miss Evans, I'm heading north with a cattle drive starting tomorrow. Dodge City's in the opposite direction from where your husband would look for you. It's a hard journey, but I could use a cook for the outfit. The pay's fair, and by the time we reach Dodge, your husband will have lost your trail. Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. You want me to join a cattle drive, with all men? Not all men, Finn said. My sister's coming too. She cooks for my outfit every season. Only this year she broke her wrist last month and can't manage on her own. He met her gaze steadily. It's not a perfect solution, but it would get you away from here, give you time to think about your next move. Rebecca's mind raced. A cattle drive was the last place Harold would think to look for his delicate, society-bred wife. By the time they reached Dodge City, the immediate hunt might have died down. I don't know how to cook for a crew, she admitted. Sarah will teach you. Most of it's just making sure there's coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and beans that won't kill anybody. His attempt at humor fell flat as Rebecca wrestled with the decision. "I don't have much choice, do I?" she finally said. Finn's expression softened. "There's always a choice, Miss Evans. I'm just offering one that might keep you safe." Rebecca took a deep breath, thinking of the life she'd planned in St. Louis, a life that now seemed impossibly out of reach. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow," Finn replied. "It won't be easy, but I give you my word. No one in my outfit will harm you. And when we reach Dodge, if you still want to head east, I'll personally see you safely on a train." As they walked back to the boarding house, Rebecca felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. The familiar path she had mapped out was gone, replaced by an uncertain journey into territory she had never imagined for herself. Yet somehow, walking beside this quiet, steady man, she felt safer than she had in years. Sarah was surprised by the change of plans but recovered quickly. "Well, I suppose I'll need to show you the basics of chuck wagon cooking tonight," she said pragmatically. "Can you make biscuits?" Rebecca shook her head. "Harold had a cook. I never needed to learn." Sarah's expression was kind but determined. "Well, you'll learn now. Nothing to it really, just flour, lard, and a bit of salt. The Cowboys aren't particular as long as it's hot, and there's plenty of it." That afternoon, while Finn went to make final preparations for the drive, Sarah taught Rebecca the fundamentals of cooking over an open fire. By evening, her hands were raw and her back ached from kneading dough, but she had produced a passable batch of biscuits and learned how to make a basic stew. "You're a quick study," Sarah said approvingly as they cleaned up. "You'll do fine." "I'm terrified," Rebecca admitted. "What if I can't do this? What if the men resent having me there?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "The men in Finn's outfit are decent. He doesn't tolerate troublemakers." She hesitated. "Rebecca, my brother doesn't usually get involved in other people's problems." "The fact that he's offering to help you says a lot." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "He said it was because of your mother." "Partly," Sarah acknowledged, "but Finn's helped plenty of folks without inviting them along on a cattle drive." She studied Rebecca's face. "Just be careful with him. He's got a good heart and it's been broken before." Before Rebecca could ask what she meant, the door opened and Finn entered, bringing with him the smell of horses and dust. "Everything's set," he announced. "We head out at dawn. Pete's bringing the chuck wagon around at first light." He looked at Rebecca. "You sure about this, Miss Evans? It's not too late to change your mind." Rebecca thought about the telegram, about Harold's reach and determination. She thought about the life she'd endured for 3 years and the bruises that were only now beginning to fade. "I'm sure, Mr. Irwin," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm ready for whatever comes." Dawn broke clear and cold over the prairie, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold as Rebecca helped Sarah load the chuck wagon. Her hands trembled slightly as she packed the flour and coffee beans, still not quite believing she was about to join a cattle drive. Finn arrived with several other men, all mounted on sturdy horses. He rode over to the wagon, tipping his hat to Rebecca. "Miss Evans, this here's Pete Wilson, my segundo," he said, indicating a weathered man with a salt and pepper beard. "And that's Charlie Davis, Hank Miller, and the kid over there is Jesse Parker. Boys, this is Miss Evans. She'll be helping my sister with the cooking." The men nodded politely, though Rebecca could see the curiosity in their eyes. She was grateful when Finn didn't offer any explanation for her presence or her bruises. "Miss Evans will ride in the wagon with Sarah," Finn continued. "We've got 20 men meeting us at the herd, and we're driving 2,000 head to Dodge. Should take us about 3 weeks if the weather holds." The reality of what lay ahead suddenly hit Rebecca. 3 weeks on the open prairie with a group of cowboys and 2,000 cattle. It was madness, and yet it felt like her only chance. As the sun climbed higher, the chuck wagon rumbled out of Hayes City, following the men on horseback. Rebecca sat beside Sarah on the wooden seat, her borrowed dress already dusty, her hair covered with a faded bonnet. "First day's the hardest," Sarah said, expertly handling the team of horses. "Body's not used to the jolting, but you'll toughen up quick." Rebecca nodded, watching as Hayes City grew smaller behind them. Somewhere back there was the stage-coach she should have taken, the path to St. Louis she had planned so carefully. And somewhere, perhaps already on his way to Kansas, was Harold, his rage building with every passing day. By midday, they reached the herd, a sea of longhorn cattle stretched across the prairie, tended by cowboys who looked as dusty and weathered as the land itself. The chuck wagon set up on a flat piece of ground away from the cattle, and Rebecca watched in amazement as Sarah efficiently established their cooking area. "We'll make a cold dinner tonight since we're getting a late start," Sarah explained, handing Rebecca a knife and a sack of potatoes. "Tomorrow we'll be up before the men to have coffee and biscuits ready." As Rebecca peeled potatoes, she could see Finn in the distance, riding along the edge of the herd, giving instructions to his men. There was an easy authority in the way he sat his horse, a confidence that drew the eye. "Your brother seems good at what he does," she commented to Sarah. Sarah smiled. "Best trail boss in Kansas, though he'd never say so himself. Started as a drover when he was 16, worked his way up. Men respect him because he never asks them to do something he wouldn't do himself." The first few days on the trail were a blur of exhaustion and sensory overload for Rebecca. She woke before dawn to help Sarah prepare breakfast, spent the day bouncing along in the wagon or working at the evening camp, then fell into an exhausted sleep on a bedroll beneath the stars. Every muscle in her body ached, and her hands grew calloused from work she had never imagined doing. But with each passing day, as they moved farther from Hayes City and deeper into the open country, Rebecca felt something unexpected, a growing sense of freedom. Out here, under the vast Kansas sky, Harold's hold on her seemed to weaken. The bruises on her face and body began to fade, and with them, some of the fear that had been her constant companion. On the fifth night, as she sat by the fire after the evening meal, Finn brought her a cup of coffee. "You're doing well, Miss Evans," he said, settling on a log nearby. "Sarah says you're a natural at camp cooking." Rebecca smiled tiredly. "I think she's being kind, but I'm learning. The men appreciate the biscuits. Jesse says they're better than his mother's, though I wouldn't repeat that to her face." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the flames dance. In the distance, someone played a harmonica, the mournful tune floating on the evening breeze. "May I ask you something, Mr. Irwin?" Rebecca said finally. "Finn," he corrected gently. "Out here, formality doesn't seem to fit." "Finn," she acknowledged with a small smile. "Why did you really help me that day in Hayes City? The truth." He studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "I told you my mother." "I know what you told me," Rebecca interrupted. "And I believe that's part of it, but there must have been other women in trouble you've encountered. Why go to such lengths for me?" Finn was quiet for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "When I saw you standing there on the street, trying so hard to look strong despite everything, I don't know. Something about you reminded me that courage comes in different forms." He looked away, embarrassed by his own words. "Besides, a man who would do that to his wife doesn't deserve to find her." Rebecca felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for helping me escape, but for not asking for the details. Most people would want to know the whole sordid story." "Your story is yours to tell when and if you choose," Finn said simply. "Though if you ever do want to talk about it, I'm a good listener." The offer hung between them, tentative and genuine. Rebecca considered it, surprised to find that, for the first time, she actually wanted to speak about what had happened, wanted someone else to understand the prison her marriage had become. "I met Harold when I was 19, she began hesitantly. "He was charming, handsome, from a good family. My father was delighted when he showed interest in me." Finn remained silent, his attention focused entirely on her. "The first year wasn't bad," Rebecca continued, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. "Harold was often away on business, and when he was home, he was particular about how things should be done, but not cruel. Then his business began to fail, and he started drinking." She paused, old memories surfacing. "The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, promised it would never happen again. I believed him." "They always promise that," Finn said quietly. Rebecca nodded. By the second year, it had become routine. A dinner not to his liking, a comment he felt disrespected him in front of others, clothes he thought too provocative, anything could set him off. He was careful, though. The bruises were always where they wouldn't show. Her hand unconsciously went to her throat where the marks of Harold's fingers had finally faded. "Until they weren't," Finn observed. "Until they weren't," Rebecca agreed. "3 nights ago, he came home drunk, accused me of looking too long at his business partner. I denied it, of course, but he was beyond reason. Her voice faltered. "He said he would teach me once and for all who I belonged to. That's when I knew I had to leave or he would eventually kill me." Finn's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "You were brave to leave. Many women never find the courage. Or the opportunity," Rebecca said. "I took his money while he slept, stole the map from his desk, and walked through the night to reach the nearest town with a stage coach. Then made my way to Hayes City." She gave a bitter laugh. "All those careful plans, and he still nearly found me." Finn reached out hesitantly, then seemed to think better of it and withdrew his hand. "He won't find you out here," he promised. "And by the time we reach Dodge, you'll be ready to decide what comes next." Rebecca nodded, suddenly exhausted by the telling of her story. The weight of it seemed lighter somehow, shared with someone who didn't judge her for staying as long as she had, or for finally running. "Thank you for listening," she said, rising from her seat. Finn stood as well. "Thank you for trusting me with it." He hesitated. "Rebecca, Miss Evans, I want you to know that not all men are like your husband. Some of us believe a woman's spirit is something to be cherished, not broken." The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Rebecca's chest, something she had thought long dead. "Good night, Finn," she said softly, retreating to her bedroll near Sarah's. As she lay looking up at the star-filled sky, Rebecca realized that for the first time in years, she was beginning to imagine a future beyond mere survival. It was a fragile, tentative hope, but it was there, as vast and full of possibility as the prairie stretching out around her. The days fell into a rhythm as the cattle drive continued northward. Rebecca learned to anticipate the needs of the outfit, having hot coffee ready when the night riders came in, preparing meals that would sustain men doing physically demanding work, mending clothes torn during the day's riding. Her hands grew stronger, her skin tanned by the sun, and she found herself smiling more often. Sarah proved to be both a patient teacher and a good friend, sharing stories of previous cattle drives and her life in Hayes City. "I was married once," she confided as they prepared dinner on the 10th day. "Good man, died of fever 5 years ago, never found anyone worth marrying since, though not for lack of offers." "Do you miss it?" Rebecca asked. "Being married?" Sarah considered the question as she stirred a pot of beans. "I miss Jim. But I don't miss being a wife, if that makes sense. I like my independence, like making my own decisions." She glanced at Rebecca. "After what you've been through, I imagine the thought of marrying again doesn't appeal." "I haven't thought that far ahead," Rebecca admitted. Right now, I'm just trying to imagine a life where I make my own choices. That's a good start, Sarah said approvingly. And what would those choices be if you could make them freely? Rebecca paused in her work, the question catching her off guard. What did she want? For so long, her only desire had been to escape Harold's fists. I'd like to learn things, she said slowly. Read more, understand the world better, maybe teach someday if I could get the proper training. Sarah nodded. Teaching's respectable work for a woman. Pays decently too, especially out west where school marms are scarce. The possibility of such a future seemed both terrifying and exhilarating to Rebecca. A life built on her own terms without a man's approval or permission. As they talked, Finn rode into camp, his shirt and face covered in dust from a day with the herd. He dismounted, leading his horse to the picket line before approaching the chuck wagon. "Ladies," he greeted them, removing his hat. "Supper smells good. It'll be ready soon enough," Sarah replied. "Go get cleaned up before you bring all that trail dust into my cooking area." Finn grinned at his sister's scolding, then turned to Rebecca. "How are you holding up, Miss Evans?" "Better each day," she replied truthfully. "Though I still haven't mastered making coffee strong enough to satisfy Mr. Wilson. Pete's been drinking trail coffee for 30 years, Finn said. His stomach's probably lined with leather by now." His eyes lingered on her face, noting the healthy color in her cheeks and the way she met his gaze directly now. "You look, well." Rebecca felt herself blush under his scrutiny. "Hard work seems to agree with me. Freedom agrees with you," he corrected gently. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary before Sarah cleared her throat. "Finn, if you're going to stand around making eyes at Rebecca instead of getting cleaned up, at least make yourself useful and fetch more water." Now it was Finn's turn to flush, the color visible even beneath his tan. "I wasn't, that is." He grabbed the water bucket without finishing his sentence and strode off toward the creek. Sarah watched him go with a knowing smile. "My brother doesn't fluster easily," she observed. "Interesting." "He wasn't flirting," Rebecca protested, her own cheeks still warm. "He was just being kind." "MMHMM," Sarah hummed skeptically. "I've known Finn all his life, Rebecca. That wasn't just kindness I saw in his eyes." She turned her attention back to the cooking. "Not that I blame him. You're a beautiful woman and brave too. Any man would be lucky to have your regard." Rebecca shook her head, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I'm not looking for another husband, Sarah. I just want to be free." "Who said anything about husbands?" Sarah replied mildly. "There's a difference between a partnership of equals and what you had with Harold." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Just because one man treated you terribly doesn't mean all men will. My brother, for instance, has never raised his hand to a woman or child in his life, not even when he had every right to be angry." Rebecca didn't know how to respond. The idea of any kind of romantic attachment felt impossible after Harold, and yet she couldn't deny the way her heart quickened when Finn was near, or the comfort she found in his quiet strength. That night, a storm rolled in from the west, bringing with it driving rain and wind that threatened to tear away the canvas covering the chuck wagon. Rebecca huddled with Sarah beneath the wagon, listening to the thunder crack overhead and watching as Finn and his men worked to keep the cattle from stampeding. "Will they be all right?" she asked, straining to see through the curtain of rain. "Finn knows what he's doing," Sarah assured her, though her own face showed concern. "The men will ride the perimeter, sing to the cattle to keep them calm, but storms like this can spook even the steadiest herd." As if in response to her words, a brilliant flash of lightning split the sky, followed instantly by a deafening crack of thunder. In the distance, Rebecca could hear the alarming sound of cattle beginning to move. "Stampede," came the cry from somewhere in the darkness. Sarah's face went pale. "God help them," she whispered. For hours, Rebecca and Sarah waited, unable to see what was happening beyond the circle of their camp. The rain continued to fall, turning the ground to mud and chilling them to the bone despite the blankets they wrapped around themselves. Just before dawn, the rain finally stopped, and with it came the sound of horses approaching. Rebecca scrambled out from under the wagon to see Finn and several of his men riding slowly into camp, their exhaustion evident in the slump of their shoulders. "Finn," Sarah called, rushing toward her brother. "Are you all right? The herd lost about 100 head," Finn replied, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "Could have been worse. No men hurt, thank God." His eyes found Rebecca's, and the relief in them was palpable. "You ladies okay?" "We're fine," Rebecca assured him, taking the reins of his horse as he dismounted stiffly. "You look exhausted." "Been better," he admitted with a wry smile. "Been worse, too." As the sun rose, revealing a landscape washed clean by the storm, Rebecca helped Sarah prepare a hearty breakfast for the men. They would need their strength to round up the scattered cattle and get the drive moving again. Finn ate quickly, then prepared to head back out. "We'll be late making camp tonight," he told Sarah. "Don't wait on us for supper." "Be careful," Sarah said, giving him a quick hug. Rebecca handed him a packet of food for later. "For you and the men," she explained. His fingers brushed hers as he took it, the brief contact sending an unexpected warmth through her. "Thank you, Rebecca," he said, using her first name naturally for the first time. As he mounted up and rode out with his men, Rebecca found herself watching until they disappeared from sight, a strange ache in her chest. "He'll be all right," Sarah said, coming to stand beside her. "Finn's survived worse than a little stampede." Rebecca nodded, embarrassed by her transparent concern. "I know, it's just. You're both risking so much to help me. If anything happened to him because I'm here..." "Stop right there," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Stampedes happen on every cattle drive, Rebecca. Has nothing to do with you being here." Her expression softened. "Besides, I haven't seen my brother look at anyone the way he looks at you in a very long time. That alone is worth having you along." Rebecca wanted to protest, to deny the implication that there was anything between her and Finn beyond friendship and gratitude. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, she knew there was something growing between them, something fragile and unexpected that both thrilled and terrified her. That night, the men returned late as predicted, bringing with them most of the scattered cattle. Rebecca had kept coffee and food warm, and the gratitude on their tired faces as they ate made her feel truly useful for the first time in her life. Finn came to thank her after the others had turned in, his face drawn with exhaustion but his eyes warm. "The men are saying you're good luck," he told her, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. "Say any other outfit would have lost more cattle in a storm like that." Rebecca smiled. "I think that has more to do with your leadership than my luck." "Maybe," Finn conceded, "but I won't argue if it makes them treat you with respect." He sipped his coffee, then added quietly, "Though anyone who didn't would answer to me." The protective note in his voice sent a shiver down Rebecca's spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "I can take care of myself," she said, more out of habit than conviction. "I know you can," Finn replied seriously. "You're one of the strongest women I've ever met, Rebecca Evans. Running from your husband, surviving on your own, adapting to trail life like you were born to it, that takes real courage." The simple sincerity of his words touched something deep inside her. "I don't feel brave," she admitted softly. "Most of the time I'm terrified." "That's what makes it brave," Finn said. "Doing what needs doing even when you're scared." He set down his empty cup and stood, I should let you rest. Morning comes early." Rebecca found herself reluctant to see him go. "Finn," she said impulsively, "thank you. Not just for the kind words, but for seeing me, the real me." In the flickering light of the dying fire, she could see the emotion that crossed his face, something deep and yearning that mirrored her own confused feelings. "Good night, Rebecca," he said softly, and walked away into the darkness. As the cattle drive entered its third week, the landscape began to change, the flat prairie giving way to more varied terrain. They were getting closer to Dodge City, and with each passing day, Rebecca felt a growing anxiety about what would happen when they arrived. She had begun to find her place here among these people, doing work that might be hard but was honest and valued. The thought of leaving, of starting over again alone in a strange city, filled her with dread. One afternoon, as she helped Sarah with the washing, she finally voiced her concerns. "What will happen when we reach Dodge?" Sarah looked up from the shirt she was scrubbing. "That depends on what you want to happen." "I don't know what I want anymore," Rebecca confessed. "When I left Harold, all I could think about was getting away, staying alive. I never planned beyond that." "Well, you have options now," Sarah said practically. "You could still go east to your aunt if that's what you want. Or you could stay in Dodge. It's a growing town, needs teachers for all the families settling there." She hesitated. "Or you could come back to Hayes City with me and Finn after the cattle are sold." The last option made Rebecca's heart leap in a way that surprised her. "Would that be appropriate? People might talk." Sarah snorted. "People always talk. Question is, do you care what they say?" She wrung out the shirt with strong hands. "Rebecca, you're a grown woman who survived hell. You've earned the right to make your own choices without worrying about wagging tongues." Rebecca considered this as she hung a pair of trousers on the line they'd rigged between two trees. The idea that she could choose her own path, regardless of social expectations, was still foreign to her. Harold had been obsessed with appearances, with what others might think. The freedom to disregard such concerns was intoxicating. "I think," she said slowly, "I'd like to return to Hayes City, at least for a while. I could help at the boarding house to earn my keep until I decide what's next." Sarah smiled, though she tried to hide it by bending over her washtub. "Finn will be pleased to hear that." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "It's not because of it's none of my business why," Sarah interrupted gently. "Though for what it's worth, I've seen how you look at my brother when you think no one's watching." Before Rebecca could respond, they heard horses approaching. It wasn't time for the men to return to camp yet, and both women looked up in surprise as 3 riders came into view. Rebecca's blood ran cold as she recognized the lead rider, even at a distance. The broad shoulders, the way he sat his horse with arrogant confidence, it was Harold. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice strangled with fear. "It's him. It's my husband." Sarah's expression hardened. "Get behind me," she ordered, reaching for the rifle that always stood propped against the chuck wagon, but it was too late to hide. Harold had already spotted her, and his face twisted with a mixture of rage and triumph as he rode directly toward them. "Rebecca," he called, his voice carrying that false warmth she knew so well, the tone that preceded his worst violence. "My dear wife, what a chase you've led me on." Sarah raised the rifle, pointing it steadily at Harold's chest. "That's far enough, mister." Harold pulled his horse to a stop, eyeing Sarah with cold amusement. "Put that down before you hurt yourself, woman. I've come for my wife, and I mean to have her." "She's not going anywhere with you," Sarah replied, her finger on the trigger. Harold's expression darkened. "She's my wife under the law. I have every right to take her home." Rebecca forced herself to step out from behind Sarah, though every instinct screamed at her to run. "How did you find me?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. You think I don't have friends in every town between here and St. Louis? Harold sneered. A woman matching your description, traveling with a cattle drive. It wasn't hard. Now get your things. We're leaving. No. The word came out stronger than Rebecca expected, fueled by weeks of growing confidence and the memory of every blow she'd endured. I'm not going with you, Harold. His face darkened, the mask of civility slipping. You stole from me, humiliated me, and now you defy me. You'll regret that, Rebecca. I promise you will. One of the men with him shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Blackburn, maybe we should come back with the sheriff. Do this legal-like. Shut up, Johnson, Harold snapped. The law's on my side. She's my property as much as the money she stole. I'm not property, Rebecca said, her fear giving way to anger. And I didn't steal anything that wasn't rightfully mine after 3 years of your abuse. Harold dismounted, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful whore, you'll come home now, or I swear to God, or what? The new voice came from behind Harold. All heads turned to see Finn sitting on his horse, his expression calm but his eyes hard as steel. 4 of his cowboys flanked him, each with a hand near their weapon. Harold turned, sizing up the newcomers. This doesn't concern you, cowboy. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, Finn corrected mildly. Way I see it, when a man raises his hand to a woman, he forfeits any right to call her his. Harold's laugh was ugly. That's not how the law sees it. We're a long way from any law out here, Finn observed, dismounting with fluid grace. Just us and the prairie. He walked forward until he stood between Harold and Rebecca. The lady's made her choice. She's not going with you. Harold's hand moved toward his coat, and Rebecca realized with horror that he was reaching for a gun. Finn, he's armed, she cried. In a blur of motion, Finn drew his own revolver before Harold's hand could close around his weapon. I wouldn't, he advised softly. Harold froze, his eyes darting between Finn's steady gun and the cowboys who had now also drawn their weapons. You'd shoot a man for claiming what's his. I'd shoot a man for threatening a woman under my protection, Finn replied evenly. And I wouldn't lose a minute's sleep over it. For a tense moment, no one moved. Rebecca could hear her heart pounding in her ears, could feel the fear and rage radiating from Harold. Finally, Harold's hand dropped to his side. This isn't over, he spat. I'll have the law on you when you reach Dodge. You're welcome to try, Finn said, his gun still trained on Harold's chest. But before you do, you might want to consider what a judge would make of those bruises you left on her. Might also wonder about those business dealings of yours that didn't quite stand up to scrutiny, the ones Rebecca knows all about. Harold's face paled. Rebecca stared at Finn in confusion. She'd never told him about Harold's questionable business practices. You're bluffing, Harold said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Finn's expression remained impassive. Word travels on the trail, Mr. Blackburn, and your reputation preceded you. He gestured with his gun. Now I suggest you and your friends leave the way you came. Don't come looking for Rebecca again. She's not yours anymore. Harold's gaze shifted to Rebecca, and the hatred in his eyes made her shiver. You'll regret this, he promised. No one leaves me. I already have, Rebecca replied, finding strength in Finn's solid presence beside her. Goodbye, Harold. With a final venomous glare, Harold mounted his horse and wheeled it around. Come on, he barked to his companions. This isn't worth my time. Rebecca watched as the 3 men rode away, unable to believe it could be so simple that Harold would give up so easily. He'll be back, she said softly. He won't let this go. Finn holstered his weapon, his expression grim. Maybe, but not today and not tomorrow. He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. Are you all right? The concern in his voice broke something inside her. After weeks of holding herself together, of building her strength day by day, the sight of Harold had brought it all crashing back: the fear, the helplessness, the despair. "I thought I was free of him," she whispered, tears filling her eyes despite her determination not to cry. "I thought—" Without warning, her knees buckled. Finn caught her before she could fall, his arms strong and steady around her waist. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe." Rebecca didn't resist when he drew her against his chest, too exhausted to maintain the careful distance she'd kept between them. She could hear his heartbeat, rapid but strong, feel the warmth of his body through his shirt. "How did you know?" she asked after a moment, her voice muffled against his chest. "How did you know Harold was here?" "One of the boys spotted riders approaching from the south," Finn explained, still holding her. "Wasn't hard to guess who it might be." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "Rebecca, I meant what I said. He won't take you anywhere you don't want to go, not while I'm breathing." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her heart swell. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate for what she felt. Finn nodded, then released her reluctantly. "We should move camp," he said, turning to the men who had remained mounted, watching the confrontation. "Pete, tell the boys we're pushing on another 3 miles before making camp tonight." "You got it, boss," Pete replied, turning his horse. As the cowboys rode off to relay the orders, Sarah approached, the rifle still in her hands. "That man needs a bullet between his eyes," she said flatly. "Sarah," Rebecca exclaimed, shocked by the vehemence in the normally practical woman's voice. "I mean it," Sarah insisted. "I saw men like him growing up. They don't stop until someone makes them stop." She looked at her brother. "You should have shot him when you had the chance." Finn shook his head. "And have Rebecca spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder for the law? No." He turned to Rebecca. "I meant what I said about his business dealings, though. I've heard things on the trail about Harold Blackburn. Seems he's not as respected in business circles as he pretends to be." Rebecca nodded slowly. "He's been involved in some questionable investments. It's why he started drinking so heavily. Things were falling apart." She hesitated. "Do you really think that would keep him away? The threat of exposure?" "Men like your husband care about 2 things: control and reputation," Finn said. "We've taken away his control over you. The threat to his reputation might be enough to make him think twice about coming after you again." Rebecca wanted to believe him, but the fear that had been her constant companion for so long was hard to shake. "I hope you're right," she said. "I couldn't bear it if he hurt any of you because of me." Finn's expression softened. "Rebecca, you're not responsible for his actions. Not now, not ever." He glanced at Sarah. "We should get moving. I want distance between us and him before nightfall." That evening, as they made camp in a new location, Rebecca felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. The confrontation with Harold had been terrifying, but she had faced him, had stood her ground with Finn beside her. For the first time, she truly believed she might be free of her husband, not just in body but in spirit as well. As she helped Sarah prepare the evening meal, she found herself watching Finn as he moved around the camp, checking on the men, making sure the cattle were settled. There was a quiet competence to everything he did, a steadiness that drew her like a moth to flame. "You should tell him," Sarah said, startling Rebecca from her thoughts. "Tell him what?" Rebecca asked, though she knew exactly what Sarah meant. "That you're falling in love with him," Sarah replied matter-of-factly, "and don't bother denying it. I've seen the way you look at him." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "It's too soon. After Harold, I shouldn't even be thinking about another man." "Why not?" Sarah challenged. "Harold took 3 years of your life. Why give him power over your future too?" Put that way, it made a certain sense. But Rebecca's fears weren't so easily dismissed. "What if I'm just grateful? What if what I feel for Finn isn't real?" Sarah's expression softened. Gratitude doesn't make your heart race when someone walks into a room. It doesn't make you watch the horizon for their return. It doesn't make you glow from the inside out when they say your name. She patted Rebecca's hand. What you feel is real, Rebecca. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Rebecca had no answer. The idea of opening herself to love again, to vulnerability, to the possibility of pain was terrifying. And yet, when she thought of Finn, of his quiet strength and gentle heart, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. That night, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Rebecca slipped away from the camp to a nearby stream. The moon was bright enough to light her way, and the sound of water over rocks was soothing to her troubled mind. She sat on a flat stone by the water's edge, hugging her knees to her chest as she tried to sort through her tangled emotions. The confrontation with Harold had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, bringing back memories she tried to bury. Couldn't sleep. Rebecca startled at Finn's voice, then relaxed as he emerged from the shadows. Too many thoughts, she admitted. He hesitated, then gestured to the space beside her. Mind if I join you, please, she said, making room on the stone. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the water and the distant lowing of cattle. Rebecca was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the subtle scent of leather and horses that clung to him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. I keep thinking he'll come back, she said finally. That this can't possibly be over so easily. Finn nodded, understanding without need for explanation. It might not be, he acknowledged. Men like Harold don't give up easily. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. But neither do I, Rebecca. Whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. The simple promise moved her deeply. Why? She asked softly. Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know? Finn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the stream. When I was 12, he began, my father beat my mother so badly she couldn't get out of bed for a week. It wasn't the first time, but it was the worst. I tried to stop him, ended up with a broken arm for my trouble. His voice remained steady, but Rebecca could hear the old pain beneath the words. After that, Ma started planning to leave. Saved every penny she could, made arrangements with her sister in Colorado. But Pa found her letter to her sister. He was waiting when she tried to leave. Rebecca's heart ached for the boy he had been. What happened? He killed her, Finn said simply. Beat her to death while Sarah and I watched. Then he rode off and never came back. Found out later he died in a bar fight in Wichita. He turned to look at Rebecca, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. When I saw you in Hays City, looking so afraid but still standing, still fighting. I couldn't walk away, not this time. Rebecca reached out instinctively, her hand finding his in the darkness. I'm so sorry, Finn. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me, he said. I'm telling you so you understand why I can promise you'll never be alone against Harold again. I know what men like him are capable of. I won't let that happen to you. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. Thank you, she whispered, the words entirely inadequate for what she felt. They sat in silence, hands still linked, as the moon traced its path across the sky. Rebecca was afraid to speak, afraid to break the fragile connection between them with words that might reveal too much of her confused heart. Finally, Finn cleared his throat. Rebecca, he said, her name gentle on his lips, when we reach Dodge, what then? She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Sarah asked me the same question today. I told her I'd like to return to Hays City if that's all right. Help at the boarding house until I decide what's next. His face remained unreadable in the moonlight. Is that what you want, truly? I think so, Rebecca said hesitantly. "I've never had the luxury of choosing what I want before. It's overwhelming." Finn nodded slowly. "I understand, and you'd be welcome at the boarding house as long as you like." He paused, then added quietly, "But I hope you'll consider another option as well." Rebecca's pulse quickened. "What option?" Finn turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "I know it's too soon. I know you've barely had time to breathe free air, let alone think about a future with anyone. But I need you to know that I care for you, Rebecca, more than I thought possible in such a short time." The simple declaration left her breathless. "Finn, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for promises. I just want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be there. And if friendship is all you ever want from me, that's enough. I needed you to know." Rebecca looked at this man who had risked everything for her, who had faced her husband without hesitation, who had shared his deepest pain to help her understand his heart. In his eyes, she saw no demand, no expectation, only a steady, patient light that offered warmth without burning. "I don't know what I feel," she admitted honestly. "Everything inside me is still so tangled, so raw, but I know that when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. And that's something I thought I'd never feel again." Finn's smile was tender in the moonlight. "That's more than enough for now," he said. When he leaned forward, Rebecca didn't pull away. His lips brushed hers with exquisite gentleness, a question rather than a demand. She answered by leaning into the kiss, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss was brief, sweet, a promise rather than a passion. When they parted, Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks, not from sorrow but from a bittersweet joy she had never expected to feel again. "We should head back," Finn said softly, helping her to her feet. "Dawn comes early." They walked back to camp hand in hand, separating only when the glow of the dying fire came into view. As Rebecca settled into her bedroll, she touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of Finn's kiss. For the first time since fleeing Harold, she slept without nightmares. The final days of the cattle drive passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca threw herself into her work, finding satisfaction in the rhythms of camp life and the growing confidence in her own abilities. Her relationship with Finn remained gentle and undemanding, a touch of hands when no one was looking, quiet conversations by the fire after the others had turned in, a deepening understanding that needed few words. As they approached Dodge City, Rebecca felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The bustling cattle town would be their first contact with civilization since leaving Hays City. The first test of whether Harold had indeed given up his pursuit or was lying in wait with the law on his side. The night before they were due to reach Dodge, Finn called the men together. "You've all done fine work," he told them, his voice carrying in the still evening air. "Tomorrow we'll drive the herd into the stockyards, get them sold, and you'll have your pay plus the bonus I promised." He paused, his eyes finding Rebecca in the circle of firelight. "Some of you know that Miss Evans has had trouble following her. I want to thank you all for your discretion and your protection. If anyone asks about her in Dodge, I trust you'll remember she's never been part of our outfit." A murmur of agreement ran through the men. Pete, the grizzled segundo, spoke up. "Anyone comes asking, we ain't seen no lady with the drive, just the boss's sister helping with the cooking." Rebecca felt a rush of gratitude for these rough men who had accepted her without question, who now offered their protection without being asked. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying in the quiet night. "All of you." The cowboys shuffled their feet, uncomfortable with the emotion in her voice. One by one they drifted away to their bedrolls, leaving Rebecca with Finn and Sarah by the fire. "Do you really think Harold might be waiting in Dodge?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear Rebecca had been trying to suppress. Finn's expression was thoughtful. "It's possible, but I meant what I said about his business dealings. I've heard rumors all along the trail about Harold Blackburn. Seems he's made enemies more powerful than friends." He looked at Rebecca. "You mentioned he was having financial troubles. How bad were they?" Rebecca considered the question. "Bad enough that he was drinking more, angry all the time. There were men who came to the house, not the type he usually did business with. Once I overheard him talking about using investors' money to cover his debts." Finn nodded slowly. "That fits with what I've heard. If he's mishandled other people's money, he might have bigger problems than finding you." "I hope you're right," Rebecca said, not entirely convinced. "I just want it to be over." "It will be," Finn promised. "One way or another." The next morning they broke camp before dawn for the final push to Dodge City. As the first buildings came into view, Rebecca felt her stomach knot with anxiety. Sarah, sensing her distress, reached over to squeeze her hand. "Remember, you've done nothing wrong," she said firmly. "You're a free woman making her own choices. Hold on to that." Rebecca nodded, grateful for the reminder. The bruises Harold had left were long healed, but the inner wounds would take longer to mend. Each day, though, she felt a little stronger, a little more like the woman she might have been if fear hadn't ruled her life for so long. Finn rode beside the wagon as they approached the outskirts of town. "I've arranged rooms for you and Sarah at Ma Ferris's boarding house," he told Rebecca. "It's clean, respectable, and Ma doesn't ask questions. I'll take the herd to the stockyards, handle the sale, and pay the men." "Should take a day or two." "And then?" Rebecca asked, not quite meeting his eyes. "And then we head back to Hayes City," Finn said simply. "Together or separately, that's your choice, Rebecca." The certainty that she would have a choice, that Finn would respect whatever decision she made, warmed her heart. "Together," she said softly, "if you'll have me." The smile that lit his face was worth any risk. "I'd like nothing better." Ma Ferris's boarding house proved to be a haven of comfort after weeks on the trail. The elderly proprietress showed Rebecca and Sarah to a clean, modest room with real beds, and a washstand with hot water luxuries that brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. "You girls get cleaned up," Ma Ferris instructed. "Dinner's at 6 sharp. I've got a roast that'll make you forget all about trail food." After she left, Rebecca sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the simple comfort of a mattress after weeks of sleeping on the ground. "I never thought I'd be so grateful for 4 walls and a roof," she said with a tired laugh. Sarah smiled as she unpinned her hat. "First thing I'm doing is taking a real bath. Then I'm sleeping for 12 hours straight." Rebecca nodded in agreement. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked after a moment. "Harold, I mean." Sarah's expression grew serious. "I don't know, Rebecca. Men like your husband don't give up easily, but Finn will do everything in his power to protect you, and so will I." The simple declaration of loyalty brought a lump to Rebecca's throat. "I don't know what I did to deserve friends like you and Finn." "You survived," Sarah said simply. "That's enough." After washing away the dust of the trail and changing into the clean dress Sarah had packed for her, Rebecca felt almost human again. They ventured downstairs for dinner, where Ma Ferris served a meal that lived up to her promises: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. "Eat up, girls," the elderly woman encouraged, refilling their coffee cups. "You look like you could use some meat on your bones." As they ate, Rebecca found herself relaxing for the first time in days. The boarding house was warm and welcoming, filled with the comforting sounds of ordinary life conversations, laughter, the clink of silverware on plates. No one gave her suspicious looks or asked uncomfortable questions. Here, She was just another traveler passing through Dodge City. After dinner, Rebecca and Sarah sat on the front porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. The street before them bustled with activity cowboys fresh off the trail spending their pay in saloons, merchants closing up shops, respectable citizens hurrying home before the wilder elements of Dodge took over the night. "It's so different from what I'm used to," Rebecca observed, watching a group of cowboys stumble laughing from a saloon across the street. "Dodge is a cattle town," Sarah explained. "Wild during drive season, quieter the rest of the year. Not as refined as the circles you moved in before, I imagine." Rebecca thought of the formal dinners, the stilted conversations, the constant pressure to be the perfect wife displaying the perfect home. "I prefer this," she said honestly. "At least here people are who they are without pretense." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That's what I've always thought. Out west, a person's judged by what they do, not who their family is or how they pour tea." As darkness fell, Rebecca found herself watching the street anxiously, looking for Finn among the men moving through town. Sarah noticed her distraction and smiled. "He'll be late," she said gently. "Selling cattle, paying the men, making arrangements for supplies, it all takes time. Don't worry. Finn knows how to take care of himself." Rebecca nodded, though she couldn't quite shake her unease. "I think I'll turn in," she said, rising from her chair. "It's been a long day." In their room, Rebecca prepared for bed, her body aching with fatigue but her mind still racing. What if Harold was in Dodge right now looking for her? What if he had indeed gone to the law, claiming she was his runaway wife? What if a knock at the door made her jump? Sarah, already in her nightgown, frowned and reached for her robe. "Who is it?" she called. "It's me," came Finn's voice from the hallway. Sarah opened the door to reveal her brother, looking tired but satisfied. "Cattle all sold?" she asked. "Got a fair price," Finn confirmed. "Men are paid and celebrating." His eyes moved past his sister to Rebecca and his expression softened. "I wanted to let you know everything's taken care of. We can leave day after tomorrow once I've arranged for supplies." Rebecca nodded, suddenly self-conscious in her borrowed nightgown. "Have you heard anything about Harold?" Finn's expression turned grave. "That's the other reason I came. There's talk in town about a man asking questions looking for his wife, he says. Matches Harold's description." Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. "He's here." "Was here," Finn corrected. "Left this morning, according to the bartender at the Dodge house. Apparently he received a telegram that called him back east urgently." "A telegram?" Rebecca frowned. "From who?" "Don't know," Finn admitted. "But from what I gathered, he left in a hurry, didn't even settle his hotel bill." Rebecca sank onto the edge of her bed, trying to make sense of it. "It doesn't sound like Harold. He wouldn't give up so easily, and he was always meticulous about appearances." "Maybe whatever business troubles you mentioned caught up with him," Sarah suggested. "You said he'd been using investors' money improperly." "It's possible," Rebecca conceded. "But it seems too convenient." Finn moved further into the room, closing the door behind him. "I thought the same thing," he admitted. "So I sent a telegram of my own to a friend who works for the Kansas Pacific Railroad in Kansas City. Asked him to check if there's any news about Harold Blackburn." Rebecca looked up sharply. And I got a reply just before I came here." Finn reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded telegram. "Harold Blackburn was arrested in Kansas City yesterday morning on charges of embezzlement and fraud. His financial house of cards finally collapsed." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "Arrested? Harold?" The concept seemed impossible. Her husband, who had been so careful about appearances, so concerned with his standing in society, in jail for financial crimes. The telegram says he's facing serious charges, Finn continued. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement from his investors. He won't be coming after you, Rebecca. He'll be lucky if he doesn't spend the next 10 years in prison. A wave of emotion swept through Rebecca: relief, disbelief, a strange sense of anticlimax. After weeks of fear, of looking over her shoulder, it seemed impossible that her ordeal could end so abruptly, with Harold facing justice not for his cruelty to her but for his financial misdeeds. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted, tears filling her eyes. "I'm relieved, but also, I don't know. I keep waiting for there to be a mistake for him to walk through that door." Finn crossed the room to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "It's over, Rebecca," he said gently. "He can't hurt you anymore. You're free." The word free echoed in her mind. Free from Harold's fists, from his control, from his rage. Free to make her own choices, to build a life on her own terms. "Free," she repeated, the word tasting strange and wonderful on her tongue. Finn smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her heart race. "Completely free," he agreed. "To go wherever you want, be whoever you want to be." Rebecca looked at this man kneeling before her, this man who had risked everything to help a stranger, who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness, who had never once made her feel like property or a possession. "What if what I want is to be with you?" she asked softly, the words escaping before she could reconsider them. Finn's eyes widened, then softened with an emotion that took her breath away. "Then I would be the happiest man in Kansas," he said simply. "But Rebecca, you don't have to decide anything now. You have time." "I've wasted enough time," she interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. 3 years living in fear, doubting myself, believing I deserved what was happening to me. I don't want to waste another day." Sarah cleared her throat pointedly. "I think I'll go see if Ma Ferris has any of that apple pie left," she said, a smile playing at her lips as she slipped from the room. Alone with Finn, Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness, but it was nothing like the fear she had lived with for so long. This was the pleasant anticipation of something new and wonderful beginning. "Rebecca," Finn said, still holding her hands, "I need you to be sure. After everything you've been through, that's why I am sure," she said. "Because of everything I've been through, I know what I don't want. And because of knowing you, I know what I do want." She squeezed his hands. "I want a man who sees me as an equal, who respects my choices, who would never raise his hand in anger. I want someone whose strength makes me feel safe, not afraid." She took a deep breath. "I want you, Finn Irwin." For a moment, he seemed speechless, his blue eyes searching hers as if looking for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he released her hands to cup her face gently. "I've loved you since I saw you standing on that street in Hayes City," he admitted. "Bruised but unbowed, still fighting." His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have reason to be afraid again." When he kissed her, it was different from their first kiss by the stream. That had been gentle, questioning. This was a promise, a claiming, a beginning. Rebecca wound her arms around his neck, letting herself sink into the sensation of being held by someone who valued her strength rather than sought to break it. When they parted, both breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "It's not proper for me to be here." Rebecca laughed softly. "I think we're well past worrying about propriety, don't you?" Finn smiled but stood nonetheless. "Maybe so, but I want to do right by you, Rebecca, in every way." He took her hand, raising it to his lips. "When we return to Hayes City, if you still feel the same way, I'd like to court you properly, and someday, if you'll have me, make you my wife." The word wife should have triggered fear after her experience with Harold. Instead, Rebecca felt only a quiet joy at the thought of building a life with this man who had shown her what love could truly be. "I'd like that," she said simply. "Very much." 2 days later, with supplies loaded and arrangements made, they left Dodge City behind. Rebecca rode beside Finn on a gentle mare he had purchased for her, Sarah following in the wagon with their supplies. As the town receded behind them and the open prairie stretched ahead, Rebecca felt a sense of possibility she had never known before. The journey back to Hays City took a week, following a more leisurely pace than the cattle drive. Each evening, as they made camp under the vast Kansas sky, Rebecca found herself falling more deeply in love with Finn, with his quiet strength, his gentle humor, his unwavering respect for her independence. By the time they reached Hays City, it felt like coming home. The boarding house welcomed her as if she had always belonged there, and the town that had once represented only a desperate hope of escape now held the promise of a future filled with joy. True to his word, Finn courted her properly, with flowers and Sunday walks, with respectful distance that gradually gave way to tender intimacy. Sarah watched their blossoming relationship with obvious satisfaction, never saying, "I told you so," but managing to convey it nonetheless with knowing smiles. 4 months after their return from the cattle drive, on a crisp autumn evening with the first hint of winter in the air, Finn asked Rebecca to marry him. They stood in the same spot where they had first met, outside the general store where she had asked a stranger for directions and found instead the love of her life. "I know it hasn't been long," he said, his hands holding hers as he looked into her eyes. "And I promised I wouldn't rush you. But I love you, Rebecca Evans, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you what real love looks like." Rebecca smiled through tears of joy. "Yes," she said simply, "with all my heart, yes." They were married in the small church in Hays City 2 weeks later, with Sarah as Rebecca's witness and Pete Wilson standing up for Finn. The ceremony was simple but joyful, a celebration not just of their love but of Rebecca's journey from fear to freedom. As winter settled over the prairie, Rebecca found in Finn's arms a warmth and security she had never known before. Each day brought new discoveries about herself, about him, about the life they were building together. He taught her to ride properly, to shoot a rifle, to handle the business side of the cattle operation he ran. She taught him the social graces she had learned as a society wife, helped expand the boarding house with Sarah, and discovered a talent for bookkeeping that soon had her managing the finances of several businesses in town. In the spring, news reached them that Harold had been sentenced to 8 years in prison for his financial crimes. Rebecca received the information with a strange sense of detachment, as if hearing about a person she had once known but who no longer had any power over her life. "Are you all right?" Finn asked that evening as they sat on the porch of the small house they had built on the edge of town. Rebecca considered the question, looking out at the land that stretched before them, land that was theirs, a future they were creating together. "Yes," she said with quiet certainty. "I'm more than all right. I'm happy, Finn, truly happy." He smiled, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "That's all I ever wanted for you." "Not all," she teased, guiding his hand to rest on her stomach. "There's something else I think you wanted." Finn's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Rebecca, are you saying that you're going to be a father come autumn?" she finished for him, her heart swelling at the joy that transformed his face. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying." He gathered her into his arms with a whoop of delight that made her laugh out loud. "A baby," he said in wonder, his hand still resting on her stomach. "Our baby." "The first of many, I hope," Rebecca said, leaning into his embrace. "As many as you want," Finn promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything I have, everything I am, is yours, Rebecca, now and always." As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Rebecca marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a desperate woman fleeing for her life to a wife, soon to be mother, respected member of the community, it seemed almost impossible that so much could change in less than a year. Yet here she was, in the arms of a man who had seen her bruises and said simply, "You're not going back there." A man who had offered her not just protection but partnership, not just safety but love. "I love you," she whispered against his lips as he bent to kiss her. "And I love you," Finn replied, "until the stars fall from the sky." Their son, James, was born on a clear October morning, with Sarah serving as midwife and Finn pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. When he finally held his son in his arms, the look of wonder and love on Finn's face made all the pain of labor fade from Rebecca's memory. "He's perfect," Finn whispered, gently touching the downy hair on his son's head. "Just like his mother." Rebecca smiled tiredly. "I think he has your eyes," she observed, "and definitely your stubborn chin." Finn laughed softly, careful not to disturb the sleeping infant. "Poor child, saddled with my features." "I happen to love your features," Rebecca protested. "They're the first things I noticed about you, standing there in the sunlight, looking so capable and strong. And here I thought it was my charming personality that won you over," Finn teased, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "That came later," Rebecca admitted, reaching out to touch his face. "After you showed me what a real man is like: kind, respectful, gentle." Finn turned his face to press a kiss to her palm. "I still can't believe how lucky I am," he said, "that you asked me for directions that day." Rebecca smiled, remembering the desperate woman she had been, how she had gathered her courage to approach a stranger. "It wasn't luck," she said softly. "It was fate." As their son grew, so did their family and their life together. 2 years after James came a daughter, Emma, with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. 3 years later, they welcomed twin boys, Michael and Thomas, who kept the entire household on their toes with their mischievous energy. The boarding house flourished under Sarah's management, eventually expanding to include a small restaurant that became known throughout western Kansas for its excellent food. Finn's cattle operation grew as well, allowing them to build a larger home that was always filled with laughter, friends, and family. 10 years to the day after Rebecca had stumbled into Hays City, bruised and afraid, she stood on the porch of their home, watching as Finn taught 8-year-old James to ride his new pony. Emma sat nearby, her nose buried in a book, while the twins chased each other through the tall grass. Sarah joined her on the porch, handing her a cup of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, following Rebecca's gaze to where Finn was patiently adjusting James's grip on the reins. "I was just thinking how different my life might have been if I'd walked a different way that day in Hays City," Rebecca replied. "If I'd asked someone else for directions, or if your brother hadn't been there at that exact moment." Sarah smiled, the years having added silver to her hair but not diminished her practical spirit. "Some things are meant to be," she said simply. "You and Finn, that was written in the stars long before either of you knew it." Rebecca nodded, watching as her husband looked up and caught her eye, the love in his expression as fresh and vibrant as it had been a decade ago. He waved, and she waved back, her heart full of gratitude for the life they had built together. That night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Finn found her in their bedroom, standing by the window looking out at the star-filled sky. "Happy anniversary," he said softly, coming to stand behind her and wrap his arms around her waist. Rebecca leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid strength of him. 10 years, she marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I asked a handsome cowboy for directions. Other times it feels like I've loved you all my life." Finn pressed a kiss to her temple. "You have," he said. "And I've loved you. We just hadn't met yet." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him, studying the beloved features that had only grown more dear with time. The years had added lines around his eyes and a touch of gray at his temples, but his gaze was as clear and steady as ever. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for seeing past my bruises that day, for saying the words I needed to hear." Finn's expression grew serious. "I've never regretted it," he said. "Not for a single moment. Every day with you has been a gift, Rebecca." As he bent to kiss her, Rebecca felt the same thrill that had coursed through her that night by the stream a decade ago. But now it was deepened by years of shared joys and sorrows, of children born and raised, of a life built on mutual respect and unwavering love. In the arms of the man who had saved her, she had found not just safety but purpose. In the family they had created, she had found not just belonging but joy. And in the journey from that frightened woman on the streets of Hayes City to the confident, beloved wife and mother she had become, Rebecca had found the greatest gift of all, herself. Outside, the Kansas wind swept across the prairie, carrying with it the scent of home and the promise of tomorrow. And inside, in the warm circle of Finn's embrace, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.